Before we can move forward, we have to look back. Why the Orlando Magic lost in the playoffs? It's not just about shooting. On today's Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is May 9th, 2024. My name is Philip Rossman-Reich. I'm the senior writer over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can find me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, we're going to dive into why the Magic lost in the playoffs, what we can learn from the loss, and how the Magic begin to fix those problems before we can figure out how to fix problems. We got to look back and figure out what those problems are, what the playoffs revealed about the Magic on today's episode of Locked On Magic. But before we do any of that, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. No matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload, we truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Remember, there's a great Locked On podcast covering every single team in the NBA. Just search for Locked On and the team you're looking for, the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. I want to start here because we have to start thinking about why the Magic lost their playoff series and why they ultimately came up short. In order to begin to figure out what this team needs. I said this throughout the course of the season, that we aren't going to really know what the Magic need. And obviously there are some obvious things which we'll talk about today. But we're not going to really know what the Magic need or what their fault lines are until we get to the playoffs, until those weaknesses are picked at and really taken advantage of. Only then are we going to be able to take a look at this team? And look, there are some major holes. Cleveland is an imperfect team, to say the least, and a team that left the door open for the Magic. A team that the Magic had their chances against. I'm not going to sit here and deny it, say otherwise. Orlando should have won the series. No offense to Cleveland. Again, Donovan Mitchell, those guys did their thing. The Magic should have won this series. And if not for inexperience, which certainly a major factor, and we'll get into that in a bit, if not for inexperience and for several key shortcomings, the Cavs won the series. And in a 7-game series that featured a close game in Game 5, a close game in Game 6, and a fairly, not a close game at the end in Game 7, but a game with wild swings in Game 7, the difference between winning and losing was not that great. I mean, I could even point to Game 1 as showing that there was a lot there that the Magic could take advantage of. And so let's start here. Let's actually start with my third reason why the Magic lost this series. Experience mattered. Experience was a key factor. And there's no way to fix that except to gain experience and come back again. I know I said this early in the playoff series. I know we've repeated this. Like, we expected the Magic to struggle in this first playoff series. And really, I look at it as this. Their experience deficit manifested itself in moments when the Magic could have put the game away. It manifested itself in the key areas when a more experienced team probably would have really dominated and put the game away. I'm thinking Game 1, Magic get the lead down to 5. They fought really hard in that game, get the lead down to 5 in the third quarter, and then they go 3 minutes without scoring. Neither team scores for 3 minutes. Those 3 minutes were that game. And eventually, Cleveland was the one to get on the board. Cleveland was the one to pull away. They closed the third quarter, I think, that game on like a 14-4 run. And the Magic are back down 15 entering the fourth quarter. That's your ball game. It's game 5, going back and forth with tension in that building, taking a 1-point lead and not expanding it, not going for the kill, letting Cleveland hang around so that their crowd could get back into it and feed that momentum in the final quarter. It's the same thing that happened in game 7. This was just a very inexperienced team and a team that did not quite know how to put games away on the road. And again, that manifests itself not only in those moments, but also with turnovers. The Magic were a heavy turnover team this year. No doubt about it. They had the worst turnover rate among all teams in the playoffs, at least entering the playoffs. They're 26th in the league at a 15% turnover rate. Orlando only turned the ball over 15.1% in the playoffs. Not the worst in the playoffs. New Orleans was worse. The Cavs scored 14.9 points off turnovers per game. Magic gave up 16.4 in the regular season. So by raw numbers, that's enough. But in a series determined by just a few possessions, by just a few momentum shifts, in a series with so many where turnovers meant so much, that killed the Magic. And so we have to ask ourselves, okay, how are the Magic going to solve this problem? How are the Magic going to be better on this? Well, first off, they've been here now. They've been in the playoffs now. Next year, they will be better. I think even the players would admit games 1 and 2 was a bit of a shell shock. Games 1 and 2, they kind of took in the experience a little bit too much and didn't understand the level of play that they had to reach. So, I told people this, and I think Jamal Mosley did a decent job in the playoffs. His decision to start Jonathan Isaac and mess up that rotation, I think it, and that with the inexperience, I think that cost the Magic a game and a half. And so, yes, like that decision mattered in a 7-game series. I think that was a tactical error that, again, the Magic played a lot better when Carter got back in the lineup. Isaac played a lot better in games 3 and 4 when he wasn't platooning into the starting lineup as much. Just when everyone was a little bit more comfortable, team was a little bit better. So now they have some experience. Now they've been in the playoffs, but I think as we begin to look, and again, we're looking back so that we can understand what the team needs moving forward. Finding some guys with playoff experience, now that the Magic have one under their belt. But this is why I talk about Horace Grant a lot. This is what I call my Horace Grant theory. The Orlando Magic in 1995 and the 94-95 season were not going to the finals without Horace Grant, without the experience that he brought to the team, without the seriousness he brought to the team as a former champion. That was a young team that didn't know what they didn't know. It was a why not us, why not now team. But Horace Grant helped stabilize them to get to the NBA Finals, to beat more experienced teams along the way. So I do think there is something there. And experience was a major factor. Again, it's not necessarily something that shows up in one way, but manifested itself in several ways throughout the playoff series. That's the one thing that the Magic can't, the Magic can try and find someone to help supplement it. But that's the one thing the Magic did that's something that they have to learn themselves. And hopefully that means they reduce their turnovers. They value possessions more. We'll get into a little bit more why point guard is going to be a little bit more necessary for the Magic. But obviously the one reason the Magic lost is the obvious one. We'll go through some shooting numbers coming up here in just a moment. But first, it's time for a quick word from our friends over at Yahoo Finance. Wouldn't it be great if you could see all of your investment and retirement accounts in one place? With Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access the expert analysis you need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. They're the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. Securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors. And it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of more than 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination. Again, that's yahoofinance.com, yahoofinance.com. We want to thank you for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. You're listening to sports. You're watching sports all day anyway. So check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. No one likes that. That's what they think we want. We don't want that. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Look, we can dance around it all we want. We can talk about it. You can talk about all the little things, and there's one more big thing I think that we learned from this playoff series that's worth diving into a little bit more. But at the end of the day, whether you win or lose basketball games comes down to whether you make shots. I know I've told this story a million times. When I was at Northwestern, covering the Northwestern basketball team, it was plastered on everything inside the basketball facility there. This was not a good basketball team when I covered them. Make shots. Like, I have shirts from Northwestern basketball that say, make shots. It sounds overly simplistic, but it is that simple. If the Magic had even shot the poor percentage they shot in the regular season from three, they would have won this series. And look, Cleveland didn't have a great shooting series either. So I think reducing this series down to shooting is oversimplifying things. But it's also Occam's razor. The simplest answer is usually the correct one. And here I can say pretty comfortably that yes, the Magic didn't shoot the ball well. For the season, they were 24th in the league, shooting 35.2% from three, and 29th in the league with just 31.3 attempts per game. In the playoffs, the Magic made only 30.9% of their 33.3 three-point attempts per game, so a few more three-point attempts, struggled to shoot them. At Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, on the road in their 4 losses, the Magic made just 26.9% of their threes. Quite simply, the Magic had to make shots, and we dove into a lot of these numbers over the course of the series. The Magic were missing a lot of open looks, a lot of shots that they are expected to make, shots that we feel comfortable with this team taking. And at the end of the day, Jamal Mosley would say it all the time, we still need our shooters to shoot with confidence. We cannot be afraid to take shots when they're open. And Cleveland, to their credit, did a good job taking away a lot of the shots that the Magic are comfortable taking. We'll get to that a little bit more here in a minute. And dared the Magic to beat them from three. They were able to do that in the 3 wins at Kia Center. They weren't able to do that in any of the 4 losses against the Cavs. And again, they built that lead early in the game of Game 7 with their 3-point shooting. Then they went cold. They were 9 for 31 from 3 in Game 7. I believe the Magic won all 3 games that they made 10 or more threes in. There's no doubt about it. The Magic need to find shooters. And, I will grant Jeff Weltman this. He is right. The Magic were 14th in the league. They shot about 35% from 3 after January 1st, so a little bit more than half the season. There is something to say that, yes, you expect young players to get better as shooters. You expect Franz Wagner to bounce back from a really poor shooting season where I think even Franz was admitting that he was questioning his shot a little bit. You hope that Jalen Suggs can maintain his shooting percentages. There is a good shooting. There's a at least decent shooting team. I won't say good shooting team. There is a decent shooting team in Orlando, but as we've said throughout the course of the season, the Magic weren't taking enough threes to even make defenses care. They were a bad three-point shooting team anyway. But even when they were making, for the most part, they weren't taking enough threes to make defenses blink. At the end of the day, it was still worth it to them to allow Orlando to shoot from beyond the arc. Look, it's quite simple. Again, Cleveland did a good job taking away the paint. The Magic scored 51.8 points in the paint per game during the regular season. They scored only 37.7 per game in the playoffs. That was the second fewest in the postseason. The Magic made only 12.8 field goals per game on 51.5% shooting in the restricted area in the playoffs, after making 18.9 per game and 65.5% shooting in the regular season. Cleveland again, and we expected this. We expected them to pack the paint. We expected them to dare Orlando to beat them from the perimeter. At the end of the day, the Magic need to make shots. So why are we talking about Paul George, Klay Thompson, Malik Monk, Buddy Hield, Anthony Simons? Why are these the offseason target? Gary Trent Jr., Tyus Jones. Why are these the offseason target? D'Angelo Russell. The list goes on. Why are these the offseason targets? Because the Magic just need players who are threats from three, who will have a little bit of gravity, who aren't afraid to take 10 threes in a game and can make 7 or 8 of them to make defenses scared a little bit. That's what we're after here. And so much of this postseason loss, it's not all about shooting. I want to make this clear. The Magic found a way to win throughout the course of the season without being a good three-point shooting team. They were very competitive in this playoff series without being a great three-point shooting team. Having said that, they obviously need three-point shooting. Again, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm going to check this real fast, so if you bear with me because I did not pull these stats up. If you look at their stats, the Magic, here it is. The Magic made more than 10 threes in their 3 wins. They were 10 for 31 in Game 7. That was the only game they lost where they made 10 or more threes. They made 9. They made 9 in games 2 and 3. In games 2, I don't know why the thumbs up happened. Sorry. They made 9 in games 2 and 5. They made 8 in game 1. Again, like the Magic didn't have to shoot particularly well, but things are simple. In order to unlock the paint the way that the Magic needed to, and Magic did not do well scoring in the paint, we're going to get to that here in a minute, they need three-point shooting. They need to unlock it. And while their shooters, I think, did the best they could, and I don't think the Magic's three-point problem is as dire as everyone thinks, they still need a knockdown shooter that's going to create a little bit of gravity. They still need someone that's going to be a constant threat. And it isn't Joe Ingles, who's a good shooter. It isn't Gary Harris, who's a good shooter on low volume. They need a volume three-point shooter. And I think we all understood this and knew this before we got to the playoffs. The playoffs confirmed how much the Magic needs shooting, or just even the threat of shooting, because Cleveland did not have a good shooting series either. But having Max Strus, having Sam Merrill when he played, even having George Niang early on in the series, having those threats from the outside allowed Cleveland to be on the front foot getting downhill, allowed them space to run their pick and rolls and give Jared Allen and, this like game 1 changed when Evan Mobley hit those 2 threes early in game 1. Two of his 3-pointers early in that game were 2 of the most critical shots in that game. And so the Magic need to find some shooting. Making some threes early helps a lot. It helped a lot in game 7 until it didn't. The Magic just have to make teams pay for daring them to shoot, because that's going to open up everything else. And some of that is about finding offensive diversity. I'm going to explain what that means and how it played out in this series coming up here in just a moment. But first, it's time for a quick word for our friends over at Monopoly Go. We're taking a time out here. We're gonna pause the game real fast, go to the tape, come to our corner, talk things out a little bit, because Monopoly Go is here, and Monopoly Go is so much fun. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get, like unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games, like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Let's get back to it. Game on. Okay, if you've listened to the show for a while, you know I've coined my own kind of coachism and phrases that I like to use here. I've talked a lot about not just positional versatility, but skill versatility is something this Magic team values. And by skill versatility, I usually mean players who do skills of other positions, who have skills that are unique for players of their size. So like Paolo Banchero running point or Franz Wagner running point, that's skill versatility. And I think the Magic want players who can be the screener in a screen role and the point guard in a screen role like they have with Paolo and Franz. The Magic are very fudgy about positions, and I think that's still admirable. I still think that's something they should aim for. That's part of who they are. That's part of their North Star and their DNA, as Jeff Weltman began to describe it. But as we watch this series, I think it became very clear that of two things. First, and I loved what CBS Sports wrote about this after the series. First is that the first thing is that this team still has to have some traditional positions. They still need guards who do guard things. When you look at this roster, and it became very, very clear after games 1 and 2 that the Magic really needed an organizer. You talk about experience. The Magic needed someone to calm them down and make sure they got the ball to spots where they could score. That Paolo Banchero especially, and he handled it masterfully. I'm not here to knock him. Paolo Banchero needed some relief. He was a starting pitcher pitching 120 pitches. By the end of game 7, you could see how exhausted he was. Just trying to carry and will his team forward because, he obviously wasn't getting the help shooting wise, but he also had to run the show. He had to be the point guard. He had to manage everything. And that's asking a lot. Instead of getting the ball to a spot where he could score, getting him an easy basket. Every single one of his baskets was tough, making his 38-point performance all the more impressive. And so a lot of what I'm talking about here is just finding ways to give Paolo easier shots. Like if there's a mission statement for what the Magic need to accomplish this offseason, it's how can we make Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner's life easier? How can we get them easier shots so they're not having to work so hard to carry our team? And that was evident throughout the series with the Cavs, because the Magic, it sometimes felt like they were banging their head against the wall. And so what I'm searching for this offseason, because I don't think the Magic necessarily need a true point guard, but they need a point guard. They need an organizer. They need someone or something to create offensive diversity. And this is what I mean by that. In the series against the Cavs, it felt like the Magic had only one way they could score. And they were hammering it and mashing that button and running that play over and over and over again. And sometimes it worked, especially at home it worked. Sometimes it didn't. But it always felt like, especially when the Magic were struggling, they were banging their head against the wall. That they were running the same kind of sets to get Paolo Banchero and pick and rolls, trying to hunt matchups, trying to create switches, trying to get him downhill and just struggling to do so in a lot of ways. And so you'd end up with Paolo getting into these ISO sets that were just low efficiency shots. And again, that's a credit to Cleveland's defense as much as anything. Orlando entered the playoffs with the worst offense among all playoff teams. They were 22nd in the league in offensive rating. So we understood that offense was going to be a problem. That's why we're talking about shooting so much. But here's the thing. The Magic just didn't get the same, just couldn't find ways to get shots in different ways, to get Paolo the ball or disguise how they were going to get him the ball. He was the point guard. He was running pick and rolls. He was running simple, post-ups or pin downs. The Magic made an adjustment in game 3, running him off the ball a little bit more so he could get him the ball without using his dribble at the elbow area or the elbow extended area or coming down to his spot along the baseline. It was a huge deal and a huge change that they went away from more and more as Game 7 wore on. Here are the numbers. The Magic averaged 48.5 drives per game during the regular season. They scored 29 points per game off drives and shot 48.9% from the floor. This is all according to Second Spectrum. In the playoffs, they averaged 51.3 drives per game, scoring 25.1 points per game and shooting 43.5%. So, again, if it felt like the Magic were driving more, and a drive is when you go from at least 20 feet from the basket to 10 feet from the basket, so you pick up 10 feet, 10 feet from the 10 feet to the basket, according to Second Spectrum. The Magic drove a lot more. About three more drives per game is pretty significant. They shot worse because Cleveland was sitting there waiting for them, and they scored less because they weren't shooting as effectively on those drives. Now, Orlando lived in the paint. That was their thing all series. They struggled in the paint. They went from 51.8 points per game during the regular season to just 37.7 per game in the playoffs. So Cleveland really effectively, both Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, effectively cut off the Magic's main way of scoring. They forced more drives. Orlando was more determined to get to the basket. And they were shooting and scoring less on those shots. If there was anything that worked offensively, it was success in the mid-range. During the regular season, Orlando shot 37.6% on 9.5 mid-range attempts per game, according to NBA.com's tracking stats. In the playoffs, they made 50.6% on 12.1 attempts per game from the mid-range. Now, in the playoffs, you do expect to shoot more mid-range shots because those are low-efficiency shots. That's kind of what you get in the playoffs. And having that and making those shots gave the Magic's offense a lift. In fact, Cleveland did a good job daring the Magic to attack them at the rim and attack them in the paint almost recklessly. And so the Magic, what they just did really well, especially in games 3 and 4, and to some extent in game 6, was they stopped short. They said, okay, we're not going to get all the way into the teeth of the defense. We're going to stop. We're going to hit the little floater. We're going to hit the little jumper. If that's what they're going to give us, that's what we're going to take. That's offensive diversity. So now Cleveland has to play for the mid-range shot. Now you can get to the basket. Now you can kick back out for 3. But at the end of the day, a lot of this was Paolo-centric. A lot of this was Franz-centric. It wasn't about movement. It wasn't about passing. Magic were a low-pass team anyway. This was about a team that had one way to attack. And they adjusted a little bit off of it, but they couldn't change it up. Cleveland was able to sit on the things the Magic were doing because there wasn't much more that the Magic were doing that they weren't already doing. And when you don't have a team that's shooting particularly well from 3, now you can sit on it. So, look, when we say, why do the Magic need a point guard? Why are we thinking about Tyus Jones, Anthony Simons, Trae Young, DeJounte Murray? Why are we thinking and talking about making sure the Magic get a real point guard into this offense? Another playmaker, a guy who can kick out and make decisions. That's who this Magic team is. They want skill versatility. They want guys who can do it all. They want all 5 players to be able to make that play. And in the playoffs, they were inconsistent with it. No doubt about it. But the other thing the Magic need to do is have different ways to attack. If you have a point guard, now you can run a pick and roll with that point guard and Wendell Carter. He can get downhill. He can get to the basket and make plays. Or you can run a pick and roll with Paolo And now your decision tree with Paolo changes, and where Paolo gets his shots and where Paolo gets the ball changes. He can sit in the dunker spot and roll hard to the basket, which he did not do, because why would he? He's got the ball in his hands a lot anyway. Now you can do different things with Paolo, put him in different spots, get his shot diet to be a little bit easier. This is why the Magic needs some offensive diversity. They need another player who can attack off the dribble, and preferably a guard who can attack off the dribble, just to open up that decision tree and open up a new type of shot diet for the Magic's main stars. And if you do that and add some three-point shooting and have some continued three-point shooting, this Magic offense is going to get better very quickly. Like, I don't think the Magic are far off from a top half of the league offense. Better efficiency from Paolo, getting him and Franz shots in easier places, better efficiency in transition, which is a huge problem in this series. Again, better decision-making from Jalen Suggs in a lot of ways. That was still an issue. There's a way for this team to get better offensively. And I think this playoff showed how badly the Magic need another guard who can just mix up the way that they attack. Because, they ended up not trusting Jalen Suggs to make decisions. Franz Wagner was bottled up and had to learn how to shoot mid-range jumpers very, very quickly. So if he adds that three-point shot, the mid-range shot is there for him now too. Paolo Banchero was just a mid-range savant in the series. All of this stuff is good. The Magic showed some good things. But at the end of the day, their bread and butter was their ability to finish at the rim and get to the basket, score in the paint. And they lost that ability in this series. And they could not find another way to make up for it. And that's ultimately the big reason why they lost this series. It's not just the three-point shooting. It was that, not that Cleveland was super offensively diverse either, but Cleveland had a few different ways to attack and a few different ways they could get at the Magic's defense. Orlando struggled to find that second way against the Cavs and their defense. But that's what we have to look back on. Now we can begin to look forward. We're going to get into a little bit more about who the Magic are going to be targeting, introduce you a little bit to the free agent class. We're going to do that on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Magic. But that's going to do it for me today. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. Of course, find me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all of them listen on podcasts to your podcast-enabled device. You can find us on YouTube as well. Just search for Locked On Magic. For the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can find us there on Twitter at OMagicDaily. And of course, be sure to check out my Patreon page, the Orlando Magic Hub, for even more Orlando Magic content. You can find that at patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub. And as always, I appreciate your support. Now that you're done listening to us, be sure to check out the Locked On Sports Day 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Day is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Day now available on the free Fire TV channels app. That's going to do it for me today, though. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. For Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.